Alrighty, Matt. I'm going to let you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you got going on here construction-wise. We're looking at a window on one of your... what are these called exactly?
Cob. So it's a cob. It's an earth and concrete made of clay, sand, and straw, and it dates back. It's basically the first building technique, and there's different variations all across the world. Cob. The word cob is the English form of it, which derives from it means loaf in Old English, loaf. And so the general building technique is that you mix clay, wet clay, with sand and straw, and you get these wet loaves, and you put them onto the wall, and you form them, and once they're dried, you know, they harden into basically a concrete. So it's a way of creating cheap and easy housing that's also, I mean, it's a thermal battery. So the walls themselves literally soak up heat and moisture and expel them as necessary. So if you can walk in here, and in the summer it's going to be cool, in the winter it's going to be warm. The temperatures, the humidity is going to be nice. They're referred to as living walls because they breathe. But over here specifically, I have an arch I did for the window. And so a really common technique for doing these kinds of structural stuff is to use willow branches. The willow branches, they act as a temporary form while the cob is drying, and once it actually solidifies I guess it's kinetic chain, kind of keeps it from, falling in on itself.
How much does this kind of cost compared to using actual building materials down at Home Depot sort of thing?
Well, so the biggest problem with cob is just the amount of work that's needed, manual labor. And so cob is functional. You can functionally build it for free. If you can find the clay, you can sift sand out of river, if you can get straw from the bottom of warehouses, people don't care about that kind of stuff, then you have all of the materials you need to build a wall. The only problem is mixing it. So the way we mix cob is on a tarp. So you can go down to Walmart, you get a 6x8 foot tarp, and you mix, you say it's a 1-to-1 mix usually. So it's clay to sand poured onto this tarp. And then you pour water on it, and you literally flip the tarp over and mash it down, and then pull it back and flip it over. And you do that over and over again until it's mixed, and then you add in straw to it manually, and usually mix it up with your hands a bit, maybe flip it a couple times. It's extremely exhausting. I hosted workshops. That's the most common way to get around that, is hosting workshops. And so I had 10 guys come over, and we would just listen to music and talk and mix all this stuff, conspiracies and whatnot.
Right.
And when we did that, I swear to God, we would get like that much done in a day.
I gotta say, how did you discover this? How did you get into this?
Okay, so I had growing up, I went to a homeschool co-op with Eben Denzer, who's the son of a famous cob builder called Kiko Denzer. And if you know anything about cob, you know who Kiko Denzer is. He's a guy who is so well established in the world of cob that I would name drop him at workshops, and people would go, "Oh my gosh, you knew Kiko Denzer? You did the Kiko Denzer stuff." But basically, from there, I would have playdates with him and stuff like that, and we would go over, and he has this beautiful cob house, just relief sculptures of grain and stuff on the walls. He's got beautiful the plastering and benches inside of his house, just picturesque mastery of cob. And so it was so cool, and I just wanted to learn how to do it because I wanted to be able to do that and build one for myself.
Okay, one thing to note is these walls are thick. So what is the story on that?
So there's a famous book, if you want to learn how to do cob, called the Cob Cottage Company, The Hand Sculpted Home. It's called The Hand Sculpted Home, written by the Cob Cottage Company. And in it, they have this one diagram that says, here's a suggested width size for each wall. And it's a graph, and you'd have to see the graph. But basically, it's it showed the range. So for example, I'm kind of all over the place here, but curved cob walls are actually stronger than straight walls.
Oh.
And you can get away with using less material if you curve your walls. So it's just a fact of nature. Curved wood, for example, is stronger than cut wood, right? You see the rafters here are all rounded. It's because I can get away with less wood by doing it that way. So it's same with cob, right? And so this diagram was showing, if you're going to do curved, load-bearing walls, you're going to want to go anywhere between this much and this much. And one of them was the thickest walls were straight load-bearing. But I read the diagram wrong. I thought it said you got to do 24 inches. It was saying you can do anything in a range of 12 inches to 24 inches. And even then, I was like, I'm just going to be safe. Because I didn't know, I'd never done cob before. So I did, these walls are bulge out. There's certain sections that are 3 foot thick.
Wow.
including this arch here. So it's a 3-foot thick arch.
Gotcha.
Which is absolutely ridiculous. I had
It's big, man. I mean, I can see it.
I've had people who come out here who have experience with the Cob and like, whoa, you building a bunker? Like, they just, yeah. But I like it. I think it looks cool.
It does. Where do you want to kind of take this? Like, where do you want to go with this type of knowledge, and how do you, I know you're saying you're doing workshops. What do you want to teach people?
Well, I personally, I want to build a homestead with this. And I think for someone my age, the idea of actually buying land with a house on it is just kind of ridiculous, with the prices and stuff like that.
Sure.
And honestly, I just think there's nothing more beautiful and satisfying than a finished Cob house. This is not finished yet.
Storms and whatnot, how do these hold up in like harsh winds and extreme weather?
Good question. That's where plaster comes in. The role of plaster does act as kind of a barrier for that kind of stuff. And naturally, plasters wear over time. Depending on how you apply it and whatnot, it can be anywhere from like every 2 years to every 2 decades, And so, for example, with water, that's a big concern people talk about. It's like, how does it hold up to water? Like I said, it breathes. So Cob can soak up moisture, and then it expels it. The sun shines on it, and it releases it. And that keeps the walls fresh. The straw, in fact, is fine. Like they've broken up Cob walls that are over 100 years old in New Zealand, and the straw was still yellow from when it was first put in because the Cob acts as such a great preserver.
Wow.
Yeah. And so as far as wind goes and that kind of stuff, there is of course some weathering, but plastering is very simple, and it's pretty common for people to do plaster anywhere from 2 to 5 years. Just like same as painting houses. Maybe you paint your house a little more often, or less often. I mean, but yeah, it holds up well.
All right, let's get it on the record. Make sure it's in there. How old are you?
I'm 19. All right, so we've done a bit. We've let it dry for like 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. And it's at a better kind of consistency. And you see how when I go over it, I'm filling in these holes here, right? And that is the condensing phase. It's just where you're really raking it and getting all the extra plaster you don't need off, and filling in all these holes. But I'm just gonna do that, and then once that's done, we'll let it sit for another 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then we'll polish it.
Got it.
So, okay, so this is the end of the second phase, right? We've done the condensing. We've moved all of the cream, or at least best as we can, moved the cream into the holes, and we're gonna let it dry again. And the last phase is called the polishing phase. And you wait until it's referred to as leather hardness, right? You want it to be the consistency of leather, so that when you're moving it, it's just like the top, like 1 millimeter that's actually moving.
Let's record it.
So last phase here, polishing phase, it's very simple. Same thing as before, but we use a floppy trowel. We'll call them a trowel.
Sure.
Something really floppy and flexible. And you're just smoothing it. Maybe we have a little more light down here. And it's the same thing as before, where you're trying to move the cream into the holes, right?
Yeah.
But, on a smaller fractal level, where everything is much smaller at this point. And it's tougher to move, right? Leather consistency, like I said. But yeah, it's very simple.
Yeah. And it is indeed very smooth. This wall is looking like the finished wall over here, to where there's no pits, no cracks. I mean, it looks like a wall.
Yeah, the thing is, one thing I think your community seems like might like is Cob refrigerators.
What?
So if you thicken a wall, so let's say you take your wall and you thicken it to something ridiculous, like 3 foot, something really thick, and then you carve a little like slot in there and put a door on it. Assuming it's on the south-facing wall and whatnot, it'll keep whatever you have in there cool. And so there's people who do that, and they claim that they can have fresh milk with a wet towel over it for up to like 3 weeks with no issues.
When do you think you're going to host your next workshop? Okay.
I might do an oven. I've been thinking about doing an oven.
Do it.
And if I did an oven, you would need shelter for it, so I might build like a little, even just like a really simple rudimentary shelter.
Yeah.
I would need some work for that. So maybe, I don't know how about this? If I was doing a workshop, you would know about it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, an oven would be... That's actually a really good starter project, though, don't you think? It's less, space required, and it's not nearly as big. I mean, and everybody gets their hands on and understanding the craft as far as how this is kind of built from ground up.
The most common one is just benches.
Thank you very much, Matt, for having a word with us.